Hey everybody, you're here from VidGamiac.com. Here we are today back in the super duper update for Grounded, going for the big one, the Muse Sting achievement. This is to defeat the Wasp Queen. Now, before you get started, you definitely want to make sure you have the Mithridatism perk unlocked and equipped. Poison resistance is going to be a big deal whenever dealing with the Wasp type of enemy, so make sure you have that. Also, bare minimum, you're going to need at least a tier 3 axe, so make sure you have one of those. The Scythe of Blossoms should count. So to get access to the Wasp Queen fight, we are going to need to cause a certain story trigger first. After installing the update, you're going to have this new structure called the Wasp Nest. There's going to be a total of 5 sprinkled around the yard. In order to get the story trigger to occur, you're going to have to destroy at least 3 of them. So, of the 5, these are going to be the 3 that I'm going to recommend you go for, as they aren't going to require that you build up any structures to reach them. First one up is going to be right here in the upper right of the map. This is going to be the northeast side of the stump in the northeast part of the yard. Once you get here, what you want to do is you want to make sure you equip your tier 3 axe, and you want to make sure you take the root of the stump going up towards the left, and then you're going to want to be very careful. Every single wasp nest in the open is going to be defended by 2 regular wasps and 1 wasp drone. Once you reach the top of the root, you can make this with a normal jump. However, it's going to be easier using a dandelion tuft to float on over. Try to stick the landing and then immediately start to hack it using your axe. It should drop to the ground. And then if it requires further hacking, make sure you do so until it breaks. And then you can collect the pieces, which are going to be the wasp paper. Now, I am going to recommend on at least one of these encounters you try to defeat a few of the wasps, as they're going to drop some items that are going to be very useful for the boss fight that's coming up. So once you destroy the nest, just make sure you try to back up and then recover your bearings. And then whenever you are ready to do so, make sure you come back and then try to defeat the wasp and the drone that are still here. If you're having trouble with this, you can just destroy the regular wasp and then just leave the drone alone. So you just work on defeating the regular, easier enemies. Thankfully, they have the same drops, so you don't really have to worry about trying to get rarer stuff from the drone or anything. The fight can be pretty tough, but thankfully the anti-poison perk is going to be a big help. Wasps are going to be weak against salt, so if you have one of those weapons, make sure you do take advantage. Either wasp type can drop 3 types of things. You have the wasp leg, the wasp shell, and pollen. The thing you definitely want to focus on are going to be the shells, so try to get as many of them as possible, as they're going to be a big component of something we need later on. So just try your best to deal with those, and then move on to the next nest. Next one up is going to be by the twig, which is going to be on the south side of the northeast part of the map. It's going to be right here, pretty out in the open, and obvious if you are coming here from the middle of the map. It's a pretty daunting journey to get here. However, if you are coming back to the game from a previous save, you should be pretty familiar with this area. Obviously, watch out for any fire ants and ladybirds in the area, but just make your way across the valley right here, and then make sure you get onto the same elevation as the twig, and then just slowly make your way up, and then obviously watch out for the wasp. Once you actually get onto the branch, you're going to want to go to the bit of it that's going to be sticking up that the nest is going to be hanging off of. Thankfully, you can drop onto the nest from on top of it, so make sure you try to line that up. And then, of course, you definitely want to be careful once you are up this high. But once you are here, just make sure you land on it and then start hacking away. You might want to have a dandelion tuft at the ready in case you do get knocked off. Just make sure you try to soften your landing and then finish the nest off. And then if you want to or need more loot, you can feel free to take on the wasp. Moving on to nest number 3, this one's going to be the north side of the toolbox, so the screwdriver side. Make sure you look for the screwdriver, and you can take this up onto the middle drawer of the toolbox, and then from there you can jump onto the nest and then start hacking away. Once you down it, make sure you finish it off, and if you do need more loot, feel free to take out the wasp as well. This one can be a little tricky since there are going to be a bunch of other enemies in the area, so make sure you don't let things get too crowded on you. As soon as you down this nest and then finish blowing it up, you should get this notification in the bottom left saying that the wasp hive has been disturbed, and that's going to be the indication that you are ready to cause the story trigger to move on to the next part. So make sure you keep an eye out for that, and then once you notice it, it's going to be time to move on. So to continue the story, what you want to do is you want to make sure you finish the rest of the current day you are on and make sure you go to bed once it's nighttime. As soon as you wake up for the following morning, you should get this cutscene right here. What's going to happen is you're going to be shown this location in the form of the brawny box. This is going to be by the toolbox we were just at. So this is going to be the upper left part of the northeast part of the map. So right next to the Java-matic machine and then north of the toolbox. You're going to have all of the Wasp inside explode out, and that's going to open up the entrance at the bottom, allowing you to go on inside. And in addition to that, the Wasp are going to be a normal random occurring enemy all throughout the yard, so make sure you have fun dealing with that. Nonetheless, that's going to be our cue to head up there, so make sure you make the journey north and then look for it on the map. Again, it's going to be the giant rectangle just to the right of the Java-matic and north of the toolbox. You're going to want to bring your tier 3 axe, but you're also going to want to bring a tier 3 hammer with you, which is going to be a big help. So make sure you bring those two with you up to the brawny box. It's going to look like this, a very big landmark that's very hard to miss if you are in the northern part of the map. You want to go in from the right side, and then right here next to the hot dog is going to be this hole. Make sure you take this hole inside, and we're going to have a little dungeon crawl in here. Be a little careful. The area is obviously going to be protected by some wasps, so if you had trouble dealing with them early on, you're definitely going to have trouble here unless you take a more stealthy approach. But make sure you take the tunnel up, and then make sure you hang a right. Once you are in the box, you're going to have to navigate around. Make sure you go straight. You can see the Famicom reference right here. And then once we get to this turn, make sure you take a left. And then we're going to follow this until we get to a glass jar. Once you see that, make sure you take a left right here. Be very careful. There are going to be some ticks and potentially a black widow in the neighborhood. So make sure you be a little careful if you have trouble with those. Once you get down this corridor, you are going to hang a right. You're going to see some jacks and a ball. Make sure you just press forward. You can mine some rust here if you need that for whatever reason. But you're going to take a right once you see this nail. And there's going to be some raw science up there for a reference. But you're going to keep pushing forward. Make sure you do mine the enemies right here. Just make sure you get through them the best you can. And then once you get out here into the open, you're going to be in this area. Make sure you take this board game up, and then once you get up here, you're going to have this gap right here. Be very careful not to fall down, so make sure you jump across this. Once you are here, you can take this pencil up, and this is going to take you up to the higher platform. Make sure you turn to the left. There's going to be a toy robot arm right here, and then make sure you equip your tier 3 hammer. If you hit the joint of this arm, it's going to open up this shortcut that's going to allow you to get back here quicker, so feel free to take advantage of that. This is going to be optional, however, it is going to save you a bunch of walking, and you don't have to deal with the wasp when we do eventually need to come back here. So make sure you drop that if you want to, but again, totally optional. But where you need to get going is going to be the boss room, so make sure you get back onto the pencil and then clear this jump right here. You're going to see a downed wasp nest as well as a jar of sour candy right here. You could take either one up to get to this higher platform right here. There's going to be a ton of wasps here, so again, be very careful if you don't want to deal with them. Try to stealth your way around them if you don't want to get into engagement. But once you get here, you're going to have a research station, so you can hunker down here and then catch your breath if you need some cover. But the boss room is going to be right over here. You're going to need to drop down in it. Highly recommend using a dandelion tuft to stick the landing. Make sure you head on inside. This is going to be the room where we are going to fight the Wasp Queen. However, we aren't going to fight her quite just yet, as we're going to need to grab something from here first. So make sure you revel in awe over the architecture, but where you want to go next is going to be right over here. There is going to be a skeleton right here. Make sure you loot it, and it's going to give you some items. Most importantly, it's going to give you the recipe to the item that spawns the actual boss. So make sure you grab that. It's going to be the memo. So look for that memo, ORC, Wasp Queen Research. Once you have that, your character should automatically learn the recipe in the form of the Bee Q Medley. And then once you have one of those, you're going to stick it into the spawner right here as you would the other two bosses. So we are going to have to make a return trip here, but once you are ready, make sure you head on outside, and then we're going to get ready to prep the actual boss. Thankfully, the ingredients for the Bee Q Medley aren't going to be too complicated. You're going to need a bee stinger, which you can get from bees, obviously. The mosquito blood sacs, you're going to need 3 of those, which can be gotten from either mosquito type. You're going to need at least 1 tiger mosquito beak, which you get from the tiger mosquito. And then you're going to need sour lumps, which you can get from sour candies. There was a jar of sour candies back in the brawny box that you could have gotten on your way to the Wasp Nest. Once you have those ingredients secure, make sure you take those back with you to the oven and make sure you cook the recipe as you normally would with the other boss items. Let that sit for a while, and then once it's finished baking, make sure you pop it in your inventory and make sure you hold on to it until you are ready to start the fight. Of course, this is going to be a boss fight, so we are going to have to do some prep work for ourselves in order to get ready for the daunting challenge. So make sure you take it upon yourself to take care of these things before you even attempt the fight. So first thing up is to make sure you grab the things that we looted from the regular wasp earlier and then take those with you to a research station. Make sure you research all three, the wasp shell, the wasp leg, and then the wasp paper. The most important thing, of course, is going to be the wasp shell, as it's going to give you the recipe for the waspidote, which is going to be a smoothie that's going to be very useful as it gives you poison resistance and clears you of any poison, which you are definitely going to need for the queen fight. So make sure you take some of those, some wasp paper, and then some spider venom with you, and then make sure you craft those at a smoothie station in order to make the waspidote. Feel free to add any modifiers to it if you want to make the smoothie stronger, and then just make sure you try to make as many as you can. I'm going to recommend anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen or so, as it is going to be super useful to clear yourself of any poison during a fight where the boss's primary attack is going to be poison. The queen is going to be resistant to most of the elemental types, including regular, so the only thing that's going to really do any damage to her is going to be anything of the salt element. She's also going to be resistant to most weapon types, so the only real candidate for this is going to be the Salt Morning Star, which is going to be a salt element mace. Make sure you craft one of those if you don't have one already. You are going to need Salt Glob, Gum Nugget, and Tough Gunk for this, so make sure you craft one of those. Feel free to upgrade it if you want to or have the supplies to do so. It's pretty good to have an upgraded weapon in every single elemental type, especially going forward. So make sure you take this over to a smithing station and then start dumping upgrades into it if you really want to. Again, this is going to be optional, as upgrades aren't going to make too much of a big deal, or they're going to take way too long to upgrade it efficiently enough. So just make sure you upgrade it as much as you can. And then once you have that, do feel free to take advantage of the second best option for weapons, which of course are going to be arrows. Make sure you have a pretty nice crossbow in hand, and make sure you craft as many salt arrows as you can, which are going to be feather arrows and salt shards. So if you have the means to do so, make sure you try to craft some arrows as well, or you can just make arrows if you're more of a ranged fighter. Nonetheless, your final loadout should look a little something like this. You should have your main weapon in the form of the Salt Morning Star, any additional salt items you may or may not have. If you plan on doing this ranged or want a good backup, make sure you carry a pretty good crossbow with as many salt arrows as you can carry. Make sure you bring your healing items, especially the waspidotes, as we do need that anti-poison. Make sure you bring a dandelion tuft to get into the boss room, and make sure you bring the spawn item in order to actually start the fight. You also still want to have Mithridatism on, as you are going to definitely need that poison resistance. Once you're ready, make sure you head up the brawny box again and make sure you head on inside, and then we're going to head all the way back to the boss room, which of course you should know the path, and feel free to take the shortcut up if you unlocked it earlier. Make sure you head on back down, and then make sure you do make a save here. Make sure you're all healed up before starting the actual fight. Of course, just like the other two bosses in this game, you start the fight by popping the spawn item into the spawner right here. Once you've done so, make sure you turn around and then let the queen fly in all dramatically. I'm going to recommend, if you have a crossbow handy, make sure you try to pop some shots as she is coming in and you can get some early damage. Make sure you have those salt arrows equipped, of course, to get the maximum damage. So the fight itself, like the rest of the game, is going to be very simple, albeit a little challenging. So the queen is going to have her normal stinging attack, where she's going to thrust forward, and then you're going to definitely want to dodge this. She's going to have her stinger shot, which is going to poison you if you hit it, although it is very easy to dodge, and she's also going to shoot poison at you if she is far away enough. My best advice is to just change up your attack strategy depending on the altitude of her flight. If she is flying low, just make sure you stick to melee and keep smacking her around. Hopefully you can stun her, which is going to ground her, which is going to allow you to land some massive damage. If she is flying too high for you to reach, make sure you stay far back and then just pepper her with some salt arrows. Make sure you try to manage your ammunition the best you can, as you definitely don't want to run out. As the fight goes on, you are going to have some regular wasps spawn in. Make sure you do take care of them before they start piling up. They are going to be quite a nuisance, especially in a big group. So make sure you try to thin out the crowd whenever you can. And then while you're trying to work on them, just make sure you try to zigzag your way around the queen's projectile attacks. You definitely don't want to get poisoned while focus on one of the minion enemies. Regardless of what you're doing, you definitely want to keep the corner of your eye on the ground you're stepping over. Make sure you do not hang around in those poison puddles too long, as those will mess you up without you realizing. So just make sure you try to avoid having those drain your health too badly. Keep your poison resistance up by drinking those waspidotes, and make sure you do take the time to heal. If you aren't poisoned and just need healing, make sure you use your regular healing items. That should allow you to get the most out of your supply, and you definitely want to ration it out through the rest of the fight, unless you were super prepared and just brought a ton in. Nonetheless, just get back to our basic strategy. Again, it's not a complex fight in any means. Just make sure you stick to melee whenever the boss is flying low, and when the boss is flying high, make sure you stick to the ranged game. Once you take the fight into deep waters, the minion enemies are going to start appearing as drones, and these you definitely want to try to take care of because the wasp drone can heal the queen by giving her some of their health. So make sure you try to take care of them as quickly as possible because we don't want the queen to recover too much. So make sure you turn your focus on taking out any drones that are going to show up. Make sure you don't underestimate the reach of your melee attack. If you can get underneath the queen, you probably can reach her just by jumping and slashing. So make sure you do that, and you can get her in a spot where you can deal massive damage. And then just make sure you back up when you do need a heal, and always mind the poison attacks, and then keep your poison resistance up the best you can. And then eventually you should be able to whittle her down a-okay, and that's going to be another boss fight in the bag. Don't forget to loot her body for some really good gear, and then once she is taken care of, you should be good for the achievement. It's going to be for 100 gamer score, and that's all there is to it.